Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto became a legend. When the seal broke and he opened his eyes, he had hoped to see his friends standing around him, welcoming him back to life. But now he's in a different time and all of his friends have long since passed away. Now the only thing he can do is put what he has been trained to be to good use and serve the galaxy from the shadows. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 6, Redefining the phrase old school. Location, SSV Everest. If a person had walked into the empty gym on the SSV Everest and they weren't a shinobi, they would have come across a peculiar sight. They would have seen Naruto, clad only in a pair of sweatpants and his shades, standing on his hands, and concentrating on a leaf that was attached to his forehead. Every couple of minutes, he would slowly push down on his hands and then push back up. It was an exercise that tested his control over his body and over his chakra. Ever since he had accepted Hackett's offer and his new rank of lieutenant commander, though he still considered himself a jonin, he had spent every waking moment getting his body back into its old fighting condition. He pushed himself every single day and more often than not, collapsed in exhaustion right on the spot when he was done. At first, he stayed on Thesha, but after he had met that Justicar and the two of them had managed to turn the exercise building they were in, which had been quite big, into what could only be described as a ruined war zone, the two of them swore that they were just sparring, but people found it hard to believe. It honestly looked more like a grudge match happened than simple sparring. It was generally agreed that he should stay on the Everest, where he was less likely to wreck things in such a grand fashion. He took offense at that as they made it sound it happened on purpose. It had taken him about 2 weeks of training, but Naruto was mostly back to his old self. He was still rusty in a few places. During the war, he had been forced to teach himself how to use the Rasengan without a clone, and now, he was back to using the clone. Not to mention that it would still take some time until he would be able to use the more powerful jutsu in his arsenal, especially the one he had copied off of Sasuke. As he thought about that one, he remembered the time when he had demonstrated the jutsu. Sasuke accused him of plagiarizing him. Even though he sounded serious during the entire argument, everyone knew that he actually wasn't and that it wasn't a real argument. In the end, he complimented Naruto in his own way on the jutsu. It proved effective the few times he used it in the war. However, he was still adjusting to this new era. He still felt like an idiot whenever he went past Inasari, even though others had assured him that he wasn't alone in that department. He was still having such a hard time navigating through both the Everest and Ceres that he was beginning to consider getting a map. He was still trying to figure out how he ended up in the women's shower when he was looking for the cafeteria. Thankfully, he recognized his mistake quickly and got out of there before anyone saw him. When he could, he would pore over the dictionary, slowly learning the English language. The process included a great deal of repeating the words, sometimes butchering them badly, and a greater deal of swearing. It was tiring work for him. Satisfied with the exercise, Naruto lowered his feet back down to the ground. As he straightened himself, he took the leaf gently off of his forehead and looked at it. It was just an ordinary leaf he had picked off of a tree on Thesha, but that wasn't why he looked at it. He remembered the time Iruka had tried to teach him, Kiba, Shikamaru, and Koji the same exercise he had just used, only for the four of them to blow him off. Kami, I was an idiot, he muttered to himself as he left the gym and entered the locker room. After a quick shower, he was out of the locker room in less than 10 minutes, clad again in his normal clothes. The minute he was out, a genin was waiting for him. He knew that the shinobi had a more specific rank, but he also knew no one was going angry about calling him a genin. Sir, the genin saluted him, which he returned. He got better at it out of necessity. Admiral Hackett wants to see you ASAP. All right, lead the way please, he replied, lowering the salute. The genin nodded. They started walking down the hallway with the genin in lead. As they walked through the ship, they would pass people in the corridors who gave Naruto a brief nod of acknowledgement. When he had first come aboard, the crew members could look at him with stunned wonder. They loosened up slightly after he told a new enlisted member that if he kept that look up, it would freeze on his face, making everyone in hearing range laugh. They soon got into an elevator and rode in silence. It stopped once and 2 soldiers walked in when the door opened. They barely acknowledged the other 2 in the elevator. They looked tired. They must have gotten off shift. Did you hear? The guy on the left said. He was wearing an engineer's uniform. The guy on the right shook his head. What? It seems like the Niners got wind of why we're here. He groaned, rubbing his forehead. Who talked? You really think I know? You're the one who told me, hero. Just spreading the word around, Angus. He stopped rubbing his forehead. I just hope that we get out of here before they do. The last thing we need is them showing up. Hiro nodded. The last thing Lord Naruto needs are the Niners showing up. He'll get drowned by them. Naruto waited until the two left before he looked at the genin guiding him. Are they really that bad? He asked. He had heard a few things about the Church of the Nine since he woke up, and what he heard wasn't comforting. The genin didn't know how to exactly answer that. On the one hand, it was a religion based on the legend beside him. On the other hand, the Church of the Nine didn't have the most stellar of records in the galaxy. You'd have to meet them yourself, my lord. Oh boy, he thought to himself. That was not an answer he liked. He was trying to keep his opinion open about these church, but what he was hearing wasn't making them sound appealing. As the elevator pinged and the doors opened to the requested deck, the genin stepped out, and so did Naruto. I can find my way from here, the blonde told him, who nodded and saluted him again before walking away. He quickly found the Admiral's office and knocked on the door before walking in. Hackett, he greeted the Admiral. Hackett was focused on his computer for a moment longer before he looked. Commander, he returned the greeting. Even though he let the blonde get away with calling him by his name, he also cautioned him that other high-ranking officers will not allow him to do that. He noticed how distracted he seemed. Everything all right? The ship's been seeing some odd readings just within our scanning range. But every time we've tried to investigate further, the readings disappear. Sounds like someone's playing peekaboo with you. Not just me, but Thesha too. He had already gotten reports from the Republics that they had gotten the same readings and were having the same problems identifying it. But that wasn't why he called the blonde here. Please come in, take a seat. He waited in silence as the blonde sat down. I've heard that you've recovered all of your former strength. Most of my strength, Naruto corrected him. There was still stuff he needed to work on. But if you're asking me if I'm capable of completing missions, the answer would be yes. Why? What's going on? There's no use beating around the bush, the Admiral thought to himself. I'll be honest with you, Naruto. Ever since you've awoken, there have been doubts about your abilities to function in the modern day. He frowned at those words. Were these doubts started by that Asari matriarch in the hospital? Every time he had passed Dr. Moria, she always looked at him skepticism and disbelief, as well as a slight hatred. He didn't know why she was like that. He had been polite to her every time they met. Yes, but others are starting to believe it too after you had that day regarding armor and weapons, he pointed out. Flashback. What in the name of Kami is this? Naruto asked as he looked into the barrel of a pistol. He was in a shooting gallery on Thesha with some of Everest's soldiers. He had been brought down to the gallery in order to get acquainted with modern-day weaponry and armor. There were some aliens in the gallery, but the majority of the people there were humans. Commander, don't do that. A nearby soldier all but screamed when he saw what the blonde was doing. He jerked his eye away from it, reacting on instinct. What? You made sound like my head's going to get blown off or something. That's exactly what would happen. That's where the bullet comes out of. Oh, right, got it. Stay from the hole in the thingy. He lowered the gun away from his face but still looked at it. So this is a projectile thrower? He asked a nearby Chunin, a middle-aged man with more gray hair than black, turning the pistol over in his hands with an expression of confusion and amazement on his face. The soldiers looked at him oddly. I haven't heard someone put it like that. But yes, that's basically it, the Chunin replied. Most of the solders there would have found the situation funny if it had been any other person. But they were dealing with a man who was from a time where kunai and shuriken were the main choice of weapons. Those same weapons were still in use today, but were mostly used for either a distraction or close-quarter combat. And I just point and pull this trigger to fire it. He held the gun the way they had shown him, pointing it at the Chunin, making the others duck. "Yes, Commander. But please point that at the target and not us," the Chunin all but begged, pointing at the row of targets. They were a row of target dummies that had enough armor on to generate a kinetic barrier, which could be turned on or off manually. "Oops, sorry about that," he apologized, swinging the gun back around to the targets. The aliens in the room snickered at the sight of the blonde. Unlike the humans, they definitely found the situation funny. While some of the soldiers scowled at them, the blonde did not. He held the gun the way he had been shown, focused on the target, and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, but the kick had caught him by surprise, making him swing his arms up. As a result, the bullet flew over the target and buried itself in the wall. The gallery was completely silent. "I'm guessing I did it wrong, didn't I?" the blonde asked sheepishly. The snickering turned into full-blown laughter when he said that. "You find this funny?" a genin who looked to be barely in his 20s demanded, glaring at a nearby Turian. "A little bit, yes," the Turian answered, trying hard not to grin. The genin looked like he wanted to slug the Turian right there, but stopped when Naruto spoke. "Yeah, it's always funny until someone gets hurt." Like an inexperienced novice who gets mad at the laughter directed at him and tries to prove that he can do it, only to injure someone, the new commander remarked in casual tone. The laughter disappeared after he said that. They weren't sure if he was threatening them or not. "I'm just saying," he told them after seeing the looks on their faces. "Will you try again, sir?" the Chunin asked him. He, along with the rest of the soldiers, almost desperately wanted him to shut the aliens up. The majority reason was so he could prove to the aliens that he wasn't a joke or an idiot. "No, I won't right now. I'll probably do it later when there isn't much of a crowd." His shaded eyes glanced over to the aliens in the gallery. "Plus, I don't think we need another spectacle like when I tried to put that armor on." He grimaced. "Fair enough, sir." He had been there in the armory earlier when Naruto was first introduced to the modern armor. It had taken him 45 minutes to put on the set they had given him, backwards. The soldiers there, which included Niji and Captain Anderson, as well as Irzia and Moria, tried to hold back their laughter, but when he asked if he had put it on right, they lost it and fell to the ground howling, "That's a no, isn't it?" Naruto had asked. After they were done laughing, Naruto went back into the locker room and spent another 45 minutes getting it on right. But even after he came out wearing it correctly, it still felt wrong on him. It felt stiff and heavy. When he tried to move, he felt clumsy and bulky. Considering that he was wearing the lightest type they had, the idea of creating a custom design for him started to be discussed. He surprised them by telling them flat out he wasn't going to wear any kind of armor unless it was absolutely necessary. When Moria asked him with a condescending smile what he would when the bullets started to fly, he looked her straight in the eye and asked if the ideas of ducking and slash or finding cover had ever occurred to the Asari, or did they just paint a big target on themselves in battle so their enemies knew where to look. To avoid a fight, both Niji and Anderson suggested he go down to the shooting gallery and be shown how to shoot a gun. "You'll have to wear armor if you go to a planet or a moon that has no breathing atmosphere or no atmosphere, Commander," one of the samurais told the blonde. "And I'll wear if and when it comes to that. Until then, I'm staying in my clothes, thank you," he replied. Moria walked into the gallery just as he finished talking, so she heard the last part. "And how exactly will you utilize a weapon rack if you do not have armor on?" she asked him, still smiling condescendingly. Instead of getting angry at her tone, he chose to focus on the other thing. He was confused by it. "What's a weapon rack?" he asked the Chunin. "It's what allows you to place your weapons on the back of your armor or your side, sir," he answered patiently. He had been training soldiers long enough to be used to stupid questions. "Ah, I see. Pass then," he declared. The soldiers weren't really surprised by his words, but the smile on Moria's face became even more condescending, if that was possible. "Then you will be weaponless in the field? Not even your precious chakri would save you every time." She butchered the word on purpose, trying to get a raise out of the humans. The soldiers were offended, but Naruto refused to let it work on him. "The word is chakra, ma'am, and you never know what it can do," he told her, completely seriousness. Besides, I'm not weaponless. That's what these are for. He pulled out a kunai and a shuriken, showing them to her. When he had first come aboard the Everest, he had given a new set of kunai and shuriken from the armory. He didn't pay attention to most of details about them when they were explained. All he needed to know was that they were sharper, lighter, and less likely to rust than what he had last. Those. She let out a harsh laugh. No one joined her as everyone, aside from Naruto, had remembered watching the new report about her infamous remark and the Alliance's reply. How could you possibly harm whatever enemies you have with knives? He turned to face the target without saying a word to her. Without any warning of any kind, his hands blurred as he reached into his holster and pouch, pulled out both kunai and shuriken, and threw them at the target. The gallery was filled with the sound of the blades spinning through the air as well as the thuds of them hitting the target. Both human and alien watched in stunned silence as he threw kunai after kunai and shuriken after shuriken at the target. Finally, when he was done, everything he had thrown at the target had either struck a fatal area or an area where it was most painful. He turned to face Moria. Like that, he told her, pointing at the target. She was stunned but she quickly clamped down on it, putting a sneer on her face. Oh yes, most impressive. You attacked a target dummy that didn't even have its shields on. Your enemies won't give that kind of luxury. He gave her an annoyed look and rolled his eyes. He walked towards the dummy and pulled out all the kunai and shuriken, placing them back in the holster and pouch. He walked back to where he originally stood, found the button that activated the shield and flipped it. He took a deep breath and clasped his hands together as if he was praying. His chakra flared to life in his hands and he brought them down to his sides. Again, his hands blurred as he threw kunai and shuriken at the target. But this time, they didn't hit the target. They tore through it. When he was done, the dummy had holes in the exact same spots he had thrown the first time and everything he had thrown was embedded in the wall behind the dummy. Everyone stared at the dummy like they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Like that, Naruto told Moria in the same tone of voice, pointing at the target again. End flashback. Boy did that story go around fast. It was like everywhere Naruto turned he was hearing it. Sheesh, you use a little futon chakra to prove a point and they never let you hear the end of it, the blonde groaned. Perhaps you shouldn't have used futon chakra, Hackett pointed out blandly. You had proven your point the first time. It didn't feel like it the way she kept talking. Moria was the one matriarch he interacted with the most. She wasn't giving him a good opinion of the rest of them. And there was also the time we introduced you to the Omni tool. That was a day the Admiral was never going to forget. He already had a feeling that it was a story to be told over drinks at a bar. He scowled. I still maintain this thing is stupid, he declared as he brought his Omni tool into visual sight. The day they had tried to explain to him how the Omni tool operates, it had led to an argument. Finally they asked how he would get past a locked door that could only be opened by using an Omni tool. He said he would kick the door down. When asked if the door was reinforced, he said he would shove a raise-non at it. If the door was reinforced to withstand such a jutsu, he would find another way to get in. And if there wasn't any other way to get in, he'd kick the door. He thought he was making a very simple point. The rest of the people thought the conversation was repetitive. The argument continued for another half hour. They finally managed to convince him to wear it so he could keep track of any money he had. He had been stunned by the fact that money was mostly handled electronically. And how do you even get this thing to go away? Naruto demanded, shaking his arm like he was trying to fling the Omni tool off. Hackett would have found the scene a little amusing, if it had been anyone else. You do it like so. He showed the blonde the motion and he repeated it. Thanks. He leaned back in the chair. So, what exactly did you guys have in mind to prove them wrong? If I have to do a written test, I am going to flat out refuse. His memories of the written tests in the academy and the Chunin exams still haunted him. He had slightly less distaste for the reports he had to write, but only slightly, mostly because Tsunade gave him a very hairy eyeball when he got stubborn. He shook his head. No. It was decided that you would be tested in a live fire exercise against the best 20 Asari commando groups on Thesha. That got the blonde's attention. How many commandos are there to a group? he asked. He had heard a few things about the Asari commandos. Until the shinobi arrived on the galactic stage, they were the best, the elite of soldiers. But ever since the reports of shinobi in action filtered out to the rest of the galaxy, there's been tension between the two groups. Although no one said it aloud, many were interested in seeing representatives of the two groups go at each other. Now they had that opportunity, with a legendary shinobi no less. From what I've been told, the average is about 5 commandos in a group. So you're sending me up against 100 supposedly elite Asari soldiers, he said, making sure he got the facts right. Hackett nodded. Kinda unfair, isn't it? I'm sure you will manage, the Admiral replied, albeit with a small smile on his face. He knew what the legendary shinobi was thinking. Location, Thesha. Everyone waited in a clearing that was on the outskirts of a forest. Moria and Irzia stood waiting on one side with the 20 commando groups behind them. They were checking their weapons, making sure everything was good to go. On the other side of the clearing, Hackett, Anderson, and Niji along with a small retinue of guards stood there, facing the Asari. Naruto was behind them, doing some last-minute checks on his gear. He had no guns on him, not even a pistol. The commandos didn't think too highly of him for that. Anderson saw the scorn in their eyes. As much as he wanted to say something, his professionalism kept him silent. It was only when he heard the last kunai holstered that he dared to open his mouth. Are you ready, Commander? As ready as I'll ever be. Naruto walked forward to the empty ground between the two groups. Afternoon, ladies, he greeted the commandos. They looked at him with blank expressions, until one of them turned and said something to the others, making them giggle and laugh while both Irzia and Moria rolled their eyes. I don't know about the rest of the galaxy, but on Earth it's not really polite to talk about someone while they're right in front of you, he told them pointedly. Oh, I am sorry, the one who had spoken said without an ounce of apology in her voice. We were just wondering if the supposed legend was ready. The giggling and laughing got louder. They couldn't really believe that this blonde who looked like he was barely out of his diaper to them was some kind legend to shinobi. Yeah, I'm ready. But I still think that this whole thing is kinda unfair, he remarked. Oh, is the little human afraid of the big scary Asari commandos? She asked in a childish voice, making the others laugh even harder. To them, this exercise was a joke. Even Moria was smiling at the idea, Irzia was not. How about we give you a 10-second head start? That way you might actually hope you have a chance. He didn't say anything. He just stared at them in silence. The laughter died down as the commandos began to feel unnerved by his unflinching stare. It was like he was staring into the depth of their souls and they couldn't stare back. Finally, he gave them a very fox-like grin. For future reference, you really shouldn't have said that, he said cheerfully. He looked to the forest. Time to play the game. Then he took off, disappearing into the forest. The commandos were surprised by his actions but couldn't do anything about as they now had to wait 10 seconds before they could go after him. The 10 seconds moved slowly for them. When time was finally up, they charged into the forest, breaking into their respective groups and scattering. After the last commando disappeared into the thickness of the woods, the two groups faced each other. Care for a little wager, gentlemen? Moria asked the humans. We have a few bets on which group beats your shinobi. Would you like to place a bet on who will win? They shared a look in silence. 100 credits say Naruto wins, Hackett finally said. 500 says he wins only using Kage Bunshin, Niji replied. This got everyone else placing bets on how the blonde would win. Not a single human placed a bet on the commandos. The jeweled fist commandos moved deeper into the woods, staying alert. Irzia, the leader, kept her shotgun aimed forward while two others watched their flanks and the last two watched their rear. Anybody see him? She asked. No. Answered the commando in the rear, her assault rifle steady in her hands. She saw an easy solution to it but it was restricted. An restriction that annoyed her. Remind me why we're not using the radar to find him. Because Matriarch Moria told us not to, so we could give the poor human a sporting chance, she said, mimicking the matriarch's voice perfectly, making the others smirk. What sporting chance? We have no idea where this guy is. Don't worry, Irza, we'll find him and the reward is ours, her second-in-command assured her. Before the exercise had started, Moria had told the commandos that whoever beat the blonde would get a substantial amount of credits for a reward. If only one group gets the reward, shouldn't we focus on the other groups? The rear commando asked. It made plausible sense to her. The fewer groups there were, the more likely they would be able to find the blonde and beat him. Irza shook her head. No, that's what he would want. Fighting amongst ourselves would give him the advantage. You would be absolutely right, the voice of the human said, echoing all around them. They raised their weapons, ready to fire, only to have their feet yanked out from under and strung up in a net. As they hung off the ground in the net, they saw Naruto standing upside down on tree branch with that fox-like grin on his face. I would use the groups fighting against each other to my advantage, just like I would use distracted commandos to my advantage. What was that? One of the Blue Fury commandos asked, spinning around and pointing her gun at a nearby bush. It's just the bush, idiot, the leader told her, making the others smirk. She was the FNG of the group, so she was the one who was frequently teased or tormented. It would fade after they got used to her, or when she died, whichever came first. Sorry, I'm just nervous, she apologized. How can you be nervous? It's just one person we're up against, another of the group reminded her. It wasn't even a task they were doing. It was sport. Yeah, but I read up on this guy. It seemed like the smart thing to do. From what she had read, that had been the right idea. From what I've learned, when he was just a low-ranked shinobi, he fought against 2 demons and a god and won all 3. Granted, she had gotten the information from a children's book, but she wasn't about to let the rest of the group know that. Unfortunately, the rest of the group laughed at her. Seriously? Asked the leader, hefting her gun up onto her shoulder. He fought against 2 demons and a god? Who would believe that kind of crap? Talk about unrealistic. You have a point there, their target's voice rang out. Before they could react, a blur burst out of a nearby bush and swiftly knocked the legs out from under the commando at the rear. As she fell, he rendered her unconscious with a quick blow to the head and disappeared out of sight, all before they could get a good aim on him. I mean, Zabuza was certainly no demon, but he tried to live up to the title. He continued speaking like nothing had happened. The remaining commandos raised their weapons and started looking around for him. But all they could see was trees and foliage. Where is he? Anyone see him? The leader demanded as she focused on the trees around her, ready to take the shot if he appeared. I can't see him. I don't know where he is. One of the commandos replied, sounding very nervous. She had never seen a commando be taken down that quickly, even if she was surprised. Nor had she seen anyone move that fast before. And I don't think Gaara was a demon either, their target spoke again, echoing around them. He was just slightly terrifying to those who didn't know him. Before anyone saw him, Naruto looked like he appeared out of a tree and rushed them. They turned to fire at him, but they weren't fast enough. He vaulted over one of them and while in midair, he grabbed another one and spun her around so that her back was facing him. As gravity took control of him again, he slammed his knee into her back, pressing her into the ground and knocking her unconscious. The 3 remaining commandos whipped around and opened fire, but they had hit nothing. He had disappeared again. How in the name of the goddess can he move that? The leader demanded as she swung her gun around. Nobody can move that fast. Well, apparently, he can. The FNG replied. What can we do against this guy? The 3rd commando asked, trying to stay calm. It was difficult, as she was getting more and more scared. It felt like she was facing a hunter who knew her every move while she didn't know a single one of his. As for Nagato, he wasn't a god, just a man with a dream. The target spoke for the 3rd time, making them even more nervous. He leapt down from a tree branch and charged at them. Grabbing hold of the commando in the middle by her waist, he continued charging and disappeared into the woods. The commando's scream cut off abruptly. And personally, I think that made him more than a god, he spoke after a minute of unnerving silence. The leader couldn't take it anymore. She screamed and started firing into the woods, hitting nothing but wood and leaves. She was so scared and frightened that she didn't think to use her biotics. "Where are you?" she shouted at the forest. "Where do you think I am?" he asked back, his voice echoing around them. His tone was slightly teasing, taunting them. "Come out and face me, you coward. Give me a fair fight. Are you kidding?" With no warning, he landed behind her and covered her mouth as well as her nose, slowly suffocating her until she blacked out from the lack of oxygen. "I'm a shinobi. The words fair fight are not in our dictionary. In fact, I'm fairly certain a few people used to consider them to be blasphemous," he told her unconscious body as it collapsed to the ground. He heard the sound of a gun being raised from behind him. He turned around and saw the FNG pointing her gun at him. Stay put," she ordered, desperately trying not to sound scared shitless. But her voice was shaky and so were her hands. She couldn't keep a steady aim on the blonde, who stared at her with no expression on his face. "I mean it, stay there." He ignored the threat and took a step towards her. He kept walking until he stood a few inches in front of the gun. Her shaking increased and she could barely hold the gun. In her mind, she wasn't facing a human. She was facing a messenger of death come to take her. He reached up and gently took the gun from her. "You're green, aren't you?" he asked her quietly. She could nod her head rapidly. He was silent for a moment, until he offered her gun back to her. She took it and he quickly rendered her unconscious with a chop to her neck. Before she hit the ground, he had disappeared. "Do you see him?" the Silent Strike's leader asked the sniper. "No, I don't," she answered. She was up in the tree while the others were in cover down below. "And I don't see any of the other groups either." This group, like some of the others, had decided to attack the other groups so they could have a better chance of winning the reward. "Keep looking," she ordered. The sniper didn't say anything in return. She just shifted her weight on the branch that held her. "It's been over 2 hours since we came into this forest," another commando grumbled as she checked her shotgun. "The only things we've seen so far are the other groups. Where could one blonde human go to?" Before anyone could answer her question, sarcastically or not, the sound of something falling in the filled their ears, which was quickly followed by the sound of a body hitting the ground. They turned to see what had happened, only to find their sniper unconscious. "Perhaps he was waiting for you lot to realize he had been watching you for the past 15 minutes, the blonde's voice rang out above them. They looked up and saw him crouched low on the same branch the sniper had been perched on. He leapt down at them, ready for the fight. The surrounding area was filled with the sounds of gunfire, biotics, and flesh hitting flesh. Then silence. The pale ghosts moved through the forest at a quick pace. They had entered the forest with a confidence that bordered on swaggering. Now they were just trying to make sure they weren't caught. They had found other commando groups, all knocked out or tied up. The first few were funny. It stopped being funny after they found the 10th group and was quickly turning into scary. "We need to get out of here," one of the commandos said. She kept glancing around, looking for the danger. She saw nothing. That's what scared her. A couple of others felt the same way, but the leader was stubborn. "No, we stick it out. Boss, you can't be serious." She whipped her head around and glared at her. "We're not cowards. We don't run from a fight we can win." The commandos that were a part of this exercise were some of the best, but the pale ghosts were the best of the best. Matriarch Moria came to them first. "You've seen the other groups. You really think we can go up against someone like that?" "Yes, I can, and so do you. You got any complaints you can shove them." But she didn't want to hear it. "I hear anyone say anything about this, they're out once we're clear of this exercise. Anything more and I will shoot you myself, clear?" She all but screamed. None of her group said a word. Good. Now. The ground suddenly gave way beneath them. They fell screaming into a large pit, landing hard at the bottom. They laid there for a brief moment and then got back up. "Who's hurt?" the leader asked, checking herself for injuries. There only seemed to be bruises. The rest of her group told her the same thing. "All right, we need to." The hole above them was suddenly closed with a makeshift barricade. Even if they were able to use their biotics to move it, they had fallen more than 20 feet into the pit. The walls looked to be made of earth with no stone in sight. They weren't going to climb out of here. They heard something fluttering down through the air. It was a piece of paper, something that had been pushed through one of the barricade's holes. The leader grabbed once it was close and read it. The message was short. Mind the gap. They had not moved from the clearing since both the blonde and the commando groups went into the forest. While Irzia was uncertain about who would win, Moria was completely confident in the commandos. They were the best on Thessia and she had no doubt in her mind that they would beat the blonde. After all, Asari commandos were the finest soldiers in the galaxy, despite what others might say. She made a show of checking the time. It's been well over 3 hours, gentlemen, she told the humans. If your so-called legendary shinobi is still going, then he must be hiding from the commandos. That's the only way he'd survived this long. You're rather confident about the commandos, Matriarch Moria, Hackett commented. Well, of course, few humans have ever gone up against Asari commandos, she replied. They're in a class all of their own. Everyone knew that. And so is Naruto. Niji replied. He had grown to like the blonde ever since he had been released from the seal and was willingly to defend him. You will have to pardon me if I don't believe you, she told him with her usual arrogance. Irzia was starting to find it off-putting. I find it hard to believe that he would be able to win against 20 of the best commando groups on Thessia. She had her people do the right research to find those groups. They wouldn't disappoint her. She heard a slight chuckle coming from the forest. When she looked, she froze in place. Then should I just go back in there and wait for them all to get up so we can have round 2? Naruto asked, leaning against one of the trees. When everyone turned their attention onto him, he walked towards them all. By the way, you probably shouldn't have offered that reward to them, he told Moria. I spent the first 45 minutes watching them attack each other. That novel idea actually shortened the whole exercise by quite some time. You only used the Kage Bunshin Jutsu. Niji asked for clarification. If the blonde said yes, then that meant he had won the bet. You mean aside from standing upside down on tree branches and on the sides of the trees? Pretty much, yeah, he answered. The Hyuga wore a triumphant smirk while the other humans, minus Hackett and Anderson, who remained professional, grumbled at the loss. The rest was just me. Of course, he wasn't going to mention that his clones had already occupied the forest for nearly 4 hours before the exercise began. The matriarchs really should have thought better of giving Hackett the forest's location. I trust your doubts have been laid to rest. Hackett asked Moria, who didn't say anything in return. She was still frozen in place, but it looked like her surprise was turning into anger. Then, if you'll excuse us, we will leave. He turned around and began walking away. Anderson and the others followed him. Irzia joined them, running up to Neji's side. As they walked away from the clearing, Naruto turned back to the matriarch. For the record, when I said that I thought this whole thing was kinda unfair, I meant for them, he told her. He was not smug or arrogant. He was completely serious. The next time you want to try something like this on me, try the best 50 commando groups on Thessia. That should be more of a challenge. He walked away from the clearing, leaving a stunned and somewhat infuriated Asari matriarch there. Chapter 7, When Does Normal Go Out the Window? Location, Naruto. No matter how much he ran, he couldn't see the edge of the forest. The trees surrounding him had no leaves on their branches and looked they had survived a forest fire. The ground itself was scorched and he saw flakes of ash floating through the air. He knew he was running, but he was running in slow motion. Wherever he looked, he saw shades of people. But whenever he got close to them, they would fade away. What is going on? Where am I? He asked himself as he kept moving. Hello, is there anyone out there? He called out. Some of the shades seemed like they turned to hear his voice, but he couldn't tell if they actually were. At you. A faint whisper of a voice echoed in his ear, making him look around, trying to see who it was that had spoken. But all he saw was the burned-out forest. Hello. He called out again. That you? The whisper echoed again, sounding a little clearer. It was also a little closer. Where are you? He looked for where that particular voice was coming from amongst the shades. Is that you? For the third time the whisper echoed in his ear, much clearer than before. This time, he managed to hear where it came from. He followed the sound of the whisper, zeroing in on a particular shade. As he got closer, the shade became more and more lifelike, until the back of a person stood in front of him. He reached out to grab the person's shoulder, turning him around. But when he saw who the person was, he stumbled back in surprise. "Oh, Orochimaru?" he asked in surprise. He shouldn't have to ask who it was. That pale skin, purple markings, and golden serpent eyes belonged to only one person. That same person had died nearly a year into the war at Nakatani. "Hello, Naruto," the snake Sunin greeted him with a smile that made him recoil. The two of them had never seen eye to eye due to their past history. Naturally the blonde was weary of him. "Have you come to join the damned? What are you talking about? Where the hell are we?" he asked, looking around. They were still in the forest, but it looked like all the shades had disappeared. It was just the two of them in the forest. Not exactly a comforting thought. Orochimaru paused and looked around himself. He seemed solemn, almost sad. That wasn't an expression he had before. "I don't know where this is. But I feel it is a place for those who are damned," he answered. I understand why you're here. But I don't why I'm here." "Are you sure?" he asked with a knowing smirk. "I would have thought you'd be damned for failing to save all of those people that Obito killed." That was a low blow, even if it was true. He still felt guilty for letting those people die, but he kept telling himself that it wouldn't happen again. In the end, his words came true. "I don't consider myself to be damned because of that. And I'm not dead." "Are you so sure about that?" He looked down at Naruto's feet. The blonde followed his gaze and saw that his feet were on fire. Before he could put the fire out, he was engulfed in a bonfire. Pain blinded all of his senses as he burned. As Orochimaru faded away, he could only scream. He came awake with a shout, trying to free himself from what felt like some kind of cloth prison. When gravity took effect and he almost fell down to the ground, he remembered that he had been sleeping in a hammock. When he had first seen the sleeper pods that the crew used, the first words out of his mouth were "fuck no." Before anyone could convince him otherwise, he made his way down to the storage area of the ship, unsealed a hammock and some rope. He told the confused onlookers that Jiraiya had all but beaten the lesson of "you never know when you're going to need it" into his brain during their trip, and proceeded to set it up. As he calmed down, he slowly lowered himself from the hammock. When he finally got his legs untangled, he just laid there on the floor, letting it cool him off. It had been 2 days since he had left Thessia in the Normandy. They had made a stop at Arcturus. He stayed on board while they were there, and now they were officially starting the shakedown run of the ship. He wasn't really sure what that was and he didn't bother to ask anyone. Of course, he had also said goodbye to Niji and his family. Flashback. He stood before the Normandy, taking a good long look at it. Most of the ships he had known before he was sealed away had been made of wood. He was still getting used to the idea of one being made out of metal. "So, I'm going to be riding in this?" he asked Niji, who stood next to him along with Hanabi and Legia. It had only been a day since the exercise with the commandos. Since Hackett had cleared him for duty, he was joining the Normandy and leaving Thessia. He had a feeling they wanted him off the planet so he wouldn't antagonize other Assyrian to avoid any incomer niners. "What's the matter, Naruto?" Hanabi asked him. "You've been staying in the Everest for the past 2 weeks." She would have thought he had gotten used to the idea. "I know that, Hanabi. But I'm still getting used to the idea about a ship that can fly through space." He knew this was going to be an experience, but he wasn't sure if it was going to be a good one or not. The Everest had stayed in orbit around the planet. This would be his first time in an actual flying ship. He didn't count the shuttle rides to and from the planet. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it in no time," Niji assured him. "I hope so." They stood in silence for a few minutes. Naruto wasn't quite sure what he could say to them. He had only known them for a little while and he didn't know if he would see them again. "Well, I should probably get going," he finally said. "Bye, Naruto. I'm gonna miss you," Hanabi told him sadly. She had grown to like the blonde and didn't really want him to go. But she also knew that he was a shinobi. There were times that he had to go and this would be one of them. I'm going to miss you too, kid. He smiled down at her. Now, can you make me a promise? A promise? Sure, she answered without missing a beat. What kind of promise? I want you to promise me that you're gonna be the best shinobi that has ever come out of the academy. That she could do and she would. Yes sir. She threw him a salute and he returned it with a grin. Niji, thanks for helping me out with the modern time, he told Hanabi's father, dropping the salute as he faced the Hyuga. It was my pleasure, Lord Naruto, he replied with a small smirk. He knew that calling the blonde a lord was guaranteed to make him annoyed. But he also wouldn't do anything to make him stop. Don't call me a lord. Sure enough, there was the annoyed retort. The two of them stared at each other for a quiet moment, before the blonde smiled. I hope I'll see you and your family again. He could hope. We hope for the same, Ligia told him, a gentle smile on her lips. Good luck, Naruto. Thank you, Ligia. But I don't need luck, it comes naturally. He turned back to look at the ship. I guess I better get on it before they come looking for me or something. With a wave goodbye, he left the family and walked towards the hatch of the Normandy. End flashback. Sir, are you okay? A nearby engineer, a frontiersman, asked him, bringing him out of his musings. Yeah, I'm fine. I just had a weird dream that's all, he told him as he sat up and stretched a little. Having slept only in his underwear and shades, he was giving the surrounding people a little bit of a show. The women in the room appreciated the show. About what, sir? Asked the engineer, trying to keep the conversation going. He was straight, but even he had to admit that the blonde was nicely developed. It also didn't help that his skin was the kind of tan one could only get from being under the sun and not from any tanning bed. Nothing really, I just met Orochimaru in a ruined forest. He paused for a moment and looked over at the engineer. Not to be rude, but you do know who Orochimaru is, right? Yes sir, I do. He was one of the most evil and vile shinobi to have ever been trained. He was a part of the first generation of the Densetsu no Sunin until he went rogue and fled from the village. The engineer wasn't quite sure why he sounded like he was reciting an answer to a teacher, but he wasn't really sure how else to answer the legend. Yeah, that was the snake bastard in a nutshell, Naruto agreed. Then he scowled but also looked a little amused. That just makes the way he died even weirder. Didn't he die after a massive manhunt and battle? He asked. He had only the one class of shinobi history when he was in high school, so he wasn't aware of everything that had happened. No. He died saving his granddaughter. The very concept of Orochimaru having a child, let alone a grandchild, had been baffling and a little weird the first time he heard about it. But then they had gone after Orochimaru to Nakatani, so there wasn't much time to think on it. When they had reached the town, the Snake Sunin had hidden his child's family. Orochimaru already had his granddaughter in his arms, the rest of her family had already been killed. He passed her off to Tsunade and ran away, back into the town. They quickly figured out why. That was the first time any of them had seen Obito descend from the sky when watching a place burn. He chased after Orochimaru through the burning streets. He didn't kill him outright. No, he toyed with the Snake Sunin. They had chased after Obito but he didn't really care about them. His attention was only on Orochimaru. By the time he had gotten bored and left, the snake was close to death. He all but begged Anko to take his granddaughter in, which she did, and said goodbye to Tsunade before he died. When they were back in the village, Naruto found her in her office, drunk and crying over what looked like a photo of her and her teammates after they had made Chunin. He left her alone with her grief. You're right, sir. That's a little weird for a man like him, the engineer admitted. But still, he died saving his family. Even an evil man can do that. A fact that I have never denied, the blonde told him. Even though Orochimaru was a snake bastard, he was human. Hey, Commander Uzumaki, the voice of the pilot, one Jeff Joker Moro rang out over the intercom. The two of them had met when Naruto first came aboard the Normandy and got along quite well with each other. We're approaching the relay, and considering the fact that you slept through the first one, I'd figured you would want a front row seat for this. Yeah, thanks, Joker. I'm on my way up, he replied as he grabbed his clothes and put them on with practiced ease. As he made his way over to the elevator, he grabbed an apple and chomped down on it. He finished it off as the elevator slowly went upwards. If this thing is really this slow, maybe they should have just put in stair, he thought to himself as he fiddled with the apple core. When the door finally opened, he walked out, tossing the core into a nearby trash disposal. The Arcturus Prime relay is in range, Joker announced over the intercom. Initiating transmission sequence. Naruto kept walking forward through the command deck, heading to the cockpit as the pilot kept talking. We are connected. Calculating transit mass and destination. The relay is hot. Acquiring approach vector. All stations secure for transit. Hey, guys, the blonde said in greeting as he walked into the cockpit and looked around. He saw Joker in the pilot seat along with a guy called Kaiden Alenko who sat in the co-pilot seat. Nilus stood behind them and watched in silence. Hey, Naruto, Joker greeted him. Just kick back and watch the show. He turned his attention back to the controls. Board is green. Approach run has begun. As he stared out of the window, Naruto was astounded. When he was first taken to the Everest and saw space for the first time out of window, he stared out the window in stunned awe for a good 10 minutes. But what hung before them surprised him even more. He didn't even know how to describe it really. All he could really say was that it looked somewhat like a tuning fork with rings revolving around a big blue core of element 0. If he hadn't known that beforehand, he would have thought it was chakra. Kami, that's impressive, he said aloud. Even though nobody said anything in return, they all silently agreed with him. Hitting the relay in 3, 2, 1. Joker counted down as he flew the ship closer to the core. An arc of Izo leapt out from the core and struck the Normandy. As the ship drew away from the core, the arc vanished and it shot forward so fast that it left a trail in its wake. Thrusters, check. Navigation, check. Internal emissions sync engaged. All systems online. Drift, just 1,500 km, Joker finished up as they sped through space. 1,500 is good. Your captain will be pleased, Nilus commented before walking away. Joker glanced back at the Turian as he left the bridge. I hate that guy, he said once he was sure he left. Nilus gave you a compliment, so you hate him? Kaiden asked with some small confusion. It sounded like a compliment to him. Spectres are trouble. I don't like having him on board. Call me paranoid. You're paranoid, he replied in deadpan. The council helped fund this project. They have a right to send someone to keep an eye on their investment. Yeah, that is the official story. But only an idiot believes the official story. He's got a point there, Naruto commented, joining in on the conversation. Kakashi had always told him to look underneath the underneath, and what Joker had said was quite similar. Both required a second look. So there's more going on here than the captain's letting on. He would have continued had the intercom not beeped. Joker. Status report, Anderson's voice ordered. Just cleared the mass relay, Captain, he automatically answered, quickly double-checking a few things. Stealth systems engaged. Everything looks solid. Good. Find a comm buoy and link us to the network. I want mission reports relayed back to Alliance Brass before we reach Eden Prime. Aye, Captain. Better brace yourself, sir. I think Nilus is headed your way. He's already here, Lieutenant. A small awkward silence filled the bridge. Tell Commander Uzumaki to meet me in the comm room for a debriefing, Anderson finished before the intercom turned off. You get that, Commander? Joker asked Naruto. Yeah, I got it. He turned around and began to walk away. After a few steps, he stopped and turned back around with a sheepish look on his face. At the risk of sounding like an idiot, where's the comm room exactly? In the 2 days he had been on the Normandy, he mostly kept to the storage area or the mess. Both Joker and Kaiden shared a look. If it had been anyone else, eye-rolling and sarcasm would have come out in full. Just go past the stairs and around the wall in the back, you won't miss it, Kaiden instructed him. Thanks, Kaiden. He turned back around and kept on walking. As he walked into what the crew called the CIC, when he asked what that stood for, they told him it meant Combat Information Center. He noticed that the ship's medical nin talking with one of the genin who looked like he was barely in his 20s. I grew up on Eden Prime, Doc, the genin told her. He looked eager and excited enough to pass for a puppy. It's not the kind of place specters visit. There's something Nilus isn't telling us about this mission. That's crazy, the doctor, Naruto believed her name to be Shakuas. She had an attitude that eerily reminded him of Tsunade, albeit with much less booze on hand, replied. The captain's in charge here. He wouldn't take orders from a specter. Not his choice, Doc. Specters don't answer to anyone. They can do whatever they want. Kill anyone who gets in their way. Ha. You watch too many spy vids, Jenkins, she told him, making him scowl at her for the comment. Then they noticed that Naruto was standing nearby. What do you think, Commander? Jenkins asked him as he saluted. We won't be staying on Eden Prime too long, will we? I'm itching for some real action. He said excitingly. Naruto just stared at him. He sounded exactly like the blonde back when he was a brand new genin. In fact, it was a little scary to see the similarities. He could almost see the green on him. I sincerely hope you're kidding, Corporal, Dr. Shakuas retorted. Your real action usually ends with me patching up crew members in the infirmary. If you want my advice, Jenkins, just keep a level head while on the mission, Naruto told him. You do that, you'll be just fine. Sorry, Commander, he apologized, not sounding apologetic at all. But this waiting's killing me. I've never been on a mission like this before. Not one with a specter on board. You and me both, the blonde thought to himself. His clones read up on the specter when they all but invaded the library. Basically, the specters were the council's version of Umbu, which meant they were highly trained, knew when to be silent, and only answered to a few. The first time he processed that knowledge, he wondered if there had been any sort of competition between the two groups. If it was definitely off the books. Kid, when it comes down to it in a mission, it won't matter if the guy next to you is a specter like Nilus or a genin like you. What will matter is if you can focus on what needs to be done and be able to do it. That's easy for you to say. You're you, he protested. This is my big chance. If I can show the brass what I can do, I might become qualified to take the Chunin exams. What the hell is he talking about, qualifying for the Chunin exams? I guess that's another I'm going to have to check when I get the chance, Naruto said to himself as he placed looking up the Chunin exams on his to-do list. I have to go. Captain Anderson is waiting for me, he told the two of them. Commander, before you go, can I ask you something? Jenkins asked, suddenly sounding nervous. If he was a kid, he would have been fidgeting. Is the legend about you true? Are you the Jinchuriki of the Jubi? Jenkins. You have no right to ask that of Commander Uzumaki. Dr. Shakuas told him sharply. It's all right, Doctor, Naruto assured her. He's just curious, that's all. He was expecting that question sooner or later. Well? Are you? Jenkins asked him again. It was something that was always discussed when it came to Naruto Uzumaki. All the history books and tales say that he sealed himself away to fight the Jubi, but they never say anything about what happens next. For a long while, there had been an idea that he lost the fight and was consumed by the Jubi. That had been killed after he had been freed. Now, people wondered if he was the Jinchuriki of the Jubi or the Nine Biju. The blonde just smiled mysteriously at him. Something along those lines, he answered before walking past them and into the comm room. Truth be told, he already knew what happened. Since he was unsealed, he occasionally checked inside his mind. What he had was slumbering, for the moment, and he wasn't going to disturb that. As he walked down the ramp, he saw that Nilus was already there, staring at the screen in front of him. Hey, Nilus, he said. He hadn't seen the Turian in the past 2 weeks, so he had no idea what he had been up to. Then again, he had spent those 2 weeks getting back into shape, so he didn't really pay attention to anything else. Naruto, I was hoping you'd get here first. It gives us the chance to talk, the Spectre told him, turning away from the screen. What do you want to talk about? He asked, putting his guard slightly up. While the Turian hadn't shown any signs that he was going to attack the blonde, one could never be so sure, and with Shinobi, that's a promise. I'm interested in this world we're going, Eden Prime. Do you know anything about it? He shrugged his shoulders. Only what I've overheard from the crew. It's something of paradise, right? Yes, a paradise. Serene. Tranquil. Safe. Eden Prime has become something of a symbol to your people. I wouldn't know, Nilus. I spent the last 2,000 years sealed away and drifting in space, he reminded the Spectre. It felt a little odd that he had to say that when it had already been established. It's proof that humanity can not only establish colonies across the galaxy, but also protect them. But how safe is it, really? I've got a question, why the hell are you asking me all this? He was a little annoyed. They both knew that he was still getting used to modern times and still didn't know everything that he needed to know. And yet, Nilus was being redundant by asking him these questions. The Turian didn't bat an eyelash, he didn't even have an eyelash. Your people are still newcomers, Naruto, you especially. The galaxy can be a very dangerous place. The academy instructors said the same thing about being a shinobi. That didn't stop me from joining, he retorted. When he heard that, Nilus couldn't help but smile. He was beginning to like this human. They both heard the sound of the door opening. Anderson walked into the room. I think it's about time we told Naruto what's really going on, he told Nilus. The Turian nodded in agreement. This mission is far more than a simple shakedown run, he told Naruto. Of course it is, the blonde replied sarcastically. Why else would we've had that incredibly redundant conversation beforehand? This is serious, Commander, Anderson told him pointedly, using his rank instead of his name to get his attention. We're making a covert pickup on Eden Prime. That's why we needed the stealth systems operational. He had briefly heard about the stealth capabilities of the Normandy, but he didn't ask for details. All he knew was that it was the first ship that was apparently able to hide from enemy scanners. How covered are we talking here? He asked. In his personal experience, the word covered had many definitions, ranging from simply sneaking to being branded as missing if caught. This comes down from the top. Information on a strictly need-to-know basis, he clarified. A research team on Eden Prime unearthed some sort of beacon during an excavation. It was Prothean. Naruto knew only a few things about the Protheans, they were just one of many things his clones had read up on. So he knew they were a little mythical to the galaxy, having supposedly built the mass relays and the Citadel, the seat of power for the galaxy. I take it that finding something like this is important. He asked them. The last time humanity made a discovery like this, it jumped our technology forward 200 years. But Eden Prime doesn't have the facilities to handle something like this. We need to bring it to the Citadel for proper study, the captain explained to him. Obviously this goes beyond human interests, Naruto, Nilus joined the conversation again. This discovery could affect every species in Council space. Also, the beacon is not the only reason I'm here. The blonde looked at the two of them. I take it this is what the Alliance wants me to do. He asked Anderson. Become the galactic version of an Umbu. The captain nodded. The Alliance has been pushing for this for a long time, he explained. Humanity wants a larger role in shaping interstellar policy. We want more say with the Citadel Council. The Spectres represent the Council's power and authority. If they accept a human into their ranks, it shows how far the Alliance has come. I've put your name forward as a candidate for the Spectres, Nilus told Naruto. With your track record, as well as that exercise you had against those commandos, you'd be a shoo-in. But I need to see your skills for myself. Eden Prime will be the first of many missions together. When we get to Eden Prime, you'll be in charge of the ground team, Anderson said. Secure the beacon and get it onto the ship ASAP. Nilus will accompany you to observe the mission. That surprised him a little. While he had been a part of teams before, he had never really led one himself. So he was a little nervous about the idea. But even though he was nervous, he was willing to see if he could do it. "That's fine by me," he told them, keeping his true feelings silent. "What's our ETA? We should be getting close to Eden." He was cut off when Joker spoke from the intercom. "Captain, we've got a problem," the pilot told them. His voice had none of its usual sarcasm. It was quite serious. "What's wrong, Joker?" Anderson asked him. "Transmission from Eden Prime, sir. You better see this." "Bring it up on screen," he ordered, walking over to the screen. Both Nilus and Naruto turned to look at it as well. The sounds of gunfire and explosions quickly filled their ears. The transmission was incredibly blurry and shaky, even more so after one woman clad in white and pink armor pushed the person filming to the ground. They saw someone trying to send a call, only to be killed a few seconds later. After a few more seconds of filming, it went to static. Everything cuts out after that. No comm traffic at all. Just goes dead. "There's nothing," Joker explained. "Reverse and hold at 38.5, Anderson ordered. The transmission went backwards and froze at the exact spot he had ordered. What they saw was a large, metal, thing descending from the sky and somehow discharging red lightning. "I don't know about you guys, but that kinda looks like a giant hand to me," Naruto commented. "Status report," the captain told Joker. 17 minutes out, Captain, he promptly answered. "No other Alliance ships in the area." "Take us in, Joker." "Fast and quiet," he ordered. "This mission just got a lot more complicated," he remarked as the intercom went off. "A small strike team can move quickly without drawing attention," Nilus noted. "It's our best chances to secure the beacon." "He's right," Naruto agreed. "We should try to keep the people on the team to minimum. I'd say only 3, maybe 4 people." "Very well, grab your gear and meet us in the cargo hold," Anderson told Nilus, who nodded and walked away. "Tell Alenko and Jenkins to suit up, Commander," he said to Naruto. "You're going in." He saluted and walked away, leaving Anderson alone in the comm room. Location, Earth. As Maya walked into the office, she took a swing from her jug. "Hot out there," she remarked, falling into her chair. She had room to stretch her legs out if she wanted to, and she did. It felt great. Liam looked up from his Omni tool. "Yeah, weather report said it was going to be a scorcher today. Just hope it rains soon." She took off her hat and tossed it onto the computer. Her aim was dead on and it landed on the corner. "Doesn't look like it." He went back to his Omni tool. "Anything interesting out there?" She shook her head. "Just a family camping near the pine trees. They're on their way to the Scar." Gave them the standard warnings and wished them a safe trip. She had done it so many times, she could do it in her sleep. "Oh saints help me, is it tourist season again?" he asked a groan, pushing his hand through his balding hair. Liam made no effort to hide the fact he was losing his hair. He liked to joke that the only reason he wasn't a fat middle-aged man was because of the job. It might not sound something true, but being a park ranger in Golden Oak National Park was no slouching matter, especially when they were so close to the Demmed Land. She nodded. "Yeah, it is. We're going to have to brace ourselves for it." She reached out for the computer on her desk. A quick check of her emails showed a new one. "Huh? What?" "Got an email from a Dr. Vomus Umbonian. He'd like to meet with me." He frowned puzzledly. "Don't think I've heard that name before." "Neither have I." It was a Turian name. That was all she knew at the moment. She did a quick check on her computer. Looks like he's not our typical doctor. That got Liam's attention. When it came to doctors, they usually dealt with the kind with degrees on botany, zoology, and such. "What kind?" he asked, getting interested. "Archaeology." And it seemed that he was something of a noted name in the field. "Archaeology? We don't have ruins anywhere around here." She looked up from the computer. "What about that supposed burial site of An Oak?" "That was a rumor we made for tourists. They bought it in bulk and made it a very busy year." He still shuddered when he thought about it. "Well, he wants to meet for a late lunch in town." She checked the time. If she left now and took the jeep, she could make it. She stood up, pushing back her chair. "I'll be back, Liam." She reached out and took. He looked up at her. "Be safe, Maya." He watched as the statuesque blonde walk out of the office, putting her hat back on her head. She was a good kid, even if she didn't like or even want to talk about her past. That was okay. He had been a Mac long enough to regale them both with stories. When she felt like talking about what happened to her, he was certain she would tell it to a friend. Location, Eden Prime. Engaging stealth systems, Joker announced as they entered the atmosphere of Eden Prime. As he flew the Normandy down out of the sky, he got a closer look at the ground beneath them. "Somebody was doing some serious digging here, Captain," he commented. "Thank you, Joker," Anderson replied before turning to face Naruto and his squad. Both Jenkins and Kaiden were wearing their armor with their weapons. Naruto wore no armor and carried no guns. The only new thing he had was a comm device in his ear. That way he could easily communicate with teammates, Nilus, and the ship. "Your team's the muscle in this operation, Commander," Anderson told the blonde. "Go in heavy and head for the dig site." "What about survivors, Captain?" asked Kaiden. "Helping survivors is a secondary objective. The beacon is your top priority," he answered, making sure his point was made. Approaching drop point 1, Joker announced as the cargo bay door opened, filling their ears with the howling of the wind. "Nilus? You're coming with us?" Jenkins asked the Turian, who was standing nearby, checking his weapons. He had packed on enough firepower to make any possible enemy think twice. He shook his head. "I move faster on my own," he told them. He took a running leap out of the ship, disappearing fast. "Nilus will scout out ahead," Anderson told the other three. "He'll feed you status reports throughout the mission, otherwise, I want radio silence." "He still needs someone to watch his back," Naruto said, folding his hands into a hand seal. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." A clone appeared at his side with a poof of smoke. Without saying a word, the clone leapt out after Nilus. "He'll be able to see how a clone can helpful in this kind of situation," he told Anderson. The captain nodded once in agreement. "The mission's yours now, Naruto. Good luck." The blonde held his tongue about not needing luck. He figured it wasn't the time for that kind of thing. "We are approaching drop point 2, Joker stated over the intercom. As the Normandy settled into a brief hover, Naruto took the initiative and leapt out of the ship. Both Kaiden and Jenkins were right behind him. The minute they had hit the ground, Naruto was alert and the other two had weapons out and ready. "Ship perimeter secured, Commander," Kaiden told him after they made a quick check. "Right, I'm the team leader," Naruto reminded himself. Would he ever get used to that feeling? "All right, let's move." He started moving and the other two fell in behind him. "Time to play the game," he thought to himself. The field they were moving through was encompassed by both trees and high rocks. Several small clusters of rocks littered the field which would give them good cover if they needed it. He glanced up at the rocks' points. Good elevation. He could use them to get the height advantage or the drop. As they moved, they saw a couple of creatures floating nearby. "What the hell are those?" Kaiden demanded, pointing his gun at them. They floated across the field like nothing was wrong. That didn't mean things couldn't change. Jenkins gave them a look and immediately dismissed them. "Gas bags. Don't worry, they're harmless," he said with a small grin directed at the biotic in the group. He returned it with a scowl. "This place got hit hard, Commander," Nilus told him through the COMM. "Hostiles everywhere. Keep your guard up." "Understood," he replied. "Is my clone with you?" "Yes, he's currently following my lead." "Good. If you find something that you think I need to see for myself, let him know. He'll know what to do." "If you say so," the Turian said before turning off the COMM. Naruto heard the disbelief in his voice, so odds are he wouldn't tell the clone. But as long as the clone kept by his side, that was fine by him. They kept to the path, ignoring the water besides them. They could hear a battle off in the distance, so they tried to make their way there. "Oh, Hades' Eye," Jenkins said in horror as they passed two corpses burned to a crisp laying on a nearby rock. He might not be from the island kingdoms, but their swearing could be useful. Must be his first time seeing a burnt body, Naruto thought to himself. He had also taken notice of the bodies, but he wasn't as horrified. He had seen one too many during the war. He was used to seeing mounds of them. Just one or two was nothing to mention. You'll have to get used to the sight, Genin, he told Jenkins shorty. You'll probably be seeing more. He winced slightly at the thought but nodded his head. Yes sir, he replied. They passed two more dead bodies before entering another field riddled with rocks. Naruto suddenly stopped midway through the field. Wait, he said, holding his hand up. What's wrong, Commander? Kaiden asked him. I don't know. Something just doesn't feel right, it's too quiet. They should have encountered something other than just gas bags, but so far, nothing. He didn't like it. I'll scout ahead, sir, Jenkins said, trying to make up for the bodies. Before either the blonde or the biotic could stop him, he moved forward. As he moved further through the field, 3 floating machines appeared from the other end and opened fire on him. He gave one strangled shout before falling down to the ground. Blood leaked into the ground from his body. As the machines turned their attention to the other 2 humans, they quickly dove for cover. The sound of the machines firing filled the air. While Kaiden stepped enough out of cover to return fire, Naruto pulled a few shuriken from the holster. Their shields are gone, sir. Kaiden said as he stepped back into cover. The blonde nodded, stood up out of cover, and expertly threw each of the shuriken at the machines. For a moment the machines just hovered there in the air, looking odd with the shuriken in their headlights. Then the moment passed and the machines exploded. What fell to the ground didn't even cover scrapes. Both men silently stepped out from behind the rocks and approached Jenkins's body. Kaiden saw the damage. It made his stomach turn a little. Ripped right through his shields, Kaiden stated after he closed Jenkins's eyes. He never had a chance. Damn it, Naruto mentally swore. He always hated it when he lost someone on his team. Jenkins was eager and that got him killed, but he was still Naruto's responsibility. Now he was dead. Even though it was wishful thinking, Naruto hoped he wouldn't have to keep going through this again. Once he was done berating himself, he focused on what came next. He and Kaiden couldn't spend time mourning him. He'll get a proper burial when we're done here, Kaiden. But for now, we have to focus, he told the biotic. Aye, sir, he replied automatically, getting back to his feet and pulling out his gun again. They approached the other end of the field. Kaiden saw more of the same machines approaching. Incoming drones. He shouted at Naruto. Thanks to that, they weren't caught off guard and were able to destroy the drones quick. They both felt a small amount of satisfaction as they watched the machines explode. I've got some burned out buildings here, Naruto, Nilus spoke through the COMM. A lot of bodies. I'm going to check it out. I'll try to catch up to you at the dig site. The comm beeped off before the blonde could respond. They passed under a couple of trees before ending up on the top of a hill. Below them, they saw one of the soldiers from the transmission, the one who wore the pink and white armor, running away from drones that were firing at her. We need to get down there now, Naruto said as she stumbled and fell to the ground. As he and Kaiden bolted down the hill, she turned around, pulled out her pistol and opened fire on the drones, causing them to explode. I think she's okay, Commander, Kaiden remarked. Their attention was distracted by a pair of humanoid robots, at least the blonde hoped they were robots, holding a human civilian over something. A white spike suddenly jutted upwards from beneath the civilian, skewing him on it. Whatever screams the man could give vanished before they had a chance to escape. Their job done, the 2 robots turned their attention back to the woman, who had hidden behind a cluster of rocks and held her assault rifle in hand. Both Naruto and Kaiden reached the bottom of the hill and joined the woman behind the cluster. The robots opened fire, hoping to hit the humans through the cluster as they slowly approached. Naruto heard the cluster being hit with the bullets. If it kept up, their cover would be chewed through and they'd be out in the open. Best to take care of the robots before that happened. Kaiden, you and the lady give me some cover fire, he ordered. Kaiden glanced at the blonde. He knew who he was and all, but the man didn't have a single gun on him. He was a little concerned. "What are you going to do?" he asked him. He made a hand seal. "I'm getting up close and personal." After making a clone and pulling out a kunai, the two stepped out of cover and charged out at the two robots, keeping low. Both Kaiden and the woman distracted the robots, Kaiden using his biotics, and the woman using her gun. The robots were halted by the attack. They returned fire but didn't realize that Naruto and his clone had gotten close to them. In unison, they swept the legs out from under them and plunged their kunai into the chest piece while also using the other hand to smash the head piece. They were dead in a matter of seconds. "Thanks for the help," the woman said, standing back up as he dismissed his clone. "I didn't think I was going to make it." Gunnery Chief Ashley Williams of the 212, she introduced herself, saluting. "You the one in charge here, sir?" "Jonin Naruto Uzumaki, of the Normandy." He returned the salute. "Are you wounded, Williams?" She waited for the punchline but nothing came. He stood there like he was serious. "Naruto Uzumaki? You're kidding me, right?" she asked with a small frown. She didn't have time for someone to play games with her. "Are you wounded, Chunin?" he repeated in the same tone of voice, using her rank instead of her name. Even though he sounded exactly the same, something told her that if she didn't answer both promptly and correctly, bad things would happen. She got the point and responded quickly. "A few scrapes and burns. Nothing serious." The others weren't so lucky. "What happened?" She took a deep breath, taking that moment to remember what happened. "We were patrolling the perimeter when the attack hit." She pointed out where they were attacked. "We tried to get off a distress call, but they cut off our communications. I've been fighting for my life ever since." She had lost track of time when that happened. She wasn't sure if it had been a couple of hours or more. "You're the only one who survived." She nodded. "We tried to double back to the beacon, but we walked straight into an ambush. As far as I know, I'm the only who survived." "Do you have any idea about what we're fighting?" he asked her. Any information he could get about the enemy was good for them. "I think they're Geth," she answered honestly. The word rang faintly in his mind, something one of his clones had read about an uprising. The book didn't have any pictures that went with it, so all he had until now was the word. Kaiden couldn't believe what she was saying. "The Geth haven't been seen outside the Vale in nearly 200 years, he protested. "So why are they here now?" "They must have come for the beacon," she answered. That was the only reason she could think of. "The dig site is close. Just over that rise," she pointed at said rise. "It might still be there." "Lead the way, Ash," Naruto ordered, shortening her name. Ashley sounded like a bit of a mouthful to him and Ash sounded a lot smoother. I, sir," she replied, not battering an eye at the name shortening. "The beacon is at the far end of this trench," she told them as they began making their way forward. They passed the civilian who was skewered on a spike as well as a few others. While no one said anything, they all felt a bit unnerved by them. Location, Earth. Maya reached town easily, parking the jeep by the little cafe where the meeting was to be. She knew the place. It had a great menu and excellent outdoor seating. Most people preferred to sit outside and enjoy the day when eating there. She was no exception. As it turned out, so was Dr. Vomus. She had to assume the Turian sitting at the table was Dr. Vomus, mostly because he was the only Turian at the cafe. Anasari sat beside him, looking around with slightly wide eyes. It made Maya wonder just how old she was. "Dr. Vomus?" she asked as she came over to the table. The Turian looked up at her. "Yes, I am," he said. There was a tone to his voice that made him sound like a teacher ready to lecture a class. "And you are Ms. Maya?" "Yep, that's me." She sat down opposite of them. She looked at the Asari with a curious expression. He noticed her look and gave a brief introduction. "My associate, Dr. T. Sony." "Hello," Dr. T. Sony said politely. "Hey, Shalia." She looked back at the Turian. "Have you guys eaten yet?" "We did beforehand. We've been content with drinks for the moment." "All right." Hope you don't mind if I eat. He gestured like he was allowing it. Please, go ahead. He waited patiently while she ordered a simple meal of a sandwich and a drink. Now, to the matter at hand, he said once the waiter walked away. Yeah, of course. So, why did you want to talk to me? Quite simply, Ms. Maya, we wish to hire you. Okay, she said. Is there a particular spot in the park you'd like to see? She started going through the spots in the park a Turian might want to go see. We do not wish to hire you for a journey to your park. We wish to hire you as security. The statement brought her out of her thoughts. Security? She asked, wanting to be sure she heard that right. Yes, he said with a nod. We are currently readying ourselves for an excavation in another system, and my employers thought it would be prudent to hire someone for security and teach the newcomers how to handle themselves out in the field. He didn't look at the Asari as he spoke, but there was definitely an implication. He was talking about her. Maya stared at him for a long moment. You're kidding, right, mate? He had to be joking. This sounded like a bad joke that she had no idea what the punchline. I'm a park ranger. I help manage a park. That's not entirely true. He looked her in the eyes. Is it, Lieutenant Clayton? She froze. How could he had known her last name? She had tried to make sure that no one knew that when she came here and became a park ranger. No one knew about her past because she didn't talk about it. And now, there was a stranger who knew who she was. Her hand started twitching, looking for a gun, any kind of weapon. She forced herself to remain calm. How do you know my name? It's not so hard when one has connections, he said dismissively. She didn't like the sound of that. It made her feel suspicions. How much do you know? Everything. Her lunch came out and was placed in front of her. Now, since we've established that my information is good, can we get to business? My group is currently excavating Prothean ruins and we are in need of security. Your name came up and it agreed on wholeheartedly. We're willing to offer you top payment for your employment, as well as any bonus we'd received from a successful dig. All you have to do is ensure our survival for a matter of months and then go back to your life as a park ranger in the Golden Oak National Park. The tone in his voice told her just what he thought of that. Maya stared him down. And if I say no? You won't. Listen, jackass, this is my life. I can decide whether or not I will take the job. And from I think about you, I'm more inclined to say no. The Asari winced at her tone. She must have felt like she was called out because she was with the Turian. Dr. Vamas didn't do such actions. He stayed in his seat, composed and calm. You will take the job, Ms. Clayton. Otherwise, I will alert the media to your location. I am sure they would be quite interested in where the missing heir to the Clayton family is residing. And who knows what would happen after that. He knew. And so did she. Once the media came banging down on her family would come. She hadn't seen them since she came here to be a park ranger. And she didn't want to see them now. Damn it, he had her over the proverbial barrel and they both knew it. You son of a bitch. He just smiled. Glad to have you on board, Ms. Maya. He activated his Omni tool and did some quick typing. Here's the address for our hotel room. We'll give you till the end of the week to put your affairs in order and quit your job. Meet us there and we'll take you to our ship. I'm sure it will be a pleasure working with you. He stood up from his seat and so did his associate. Enjoy your meal. They walked away, leaving her alone at the table with her lunch going cold in front of her. Location, Eden Prime. Naruto and his team entered the trench, moving from rock cluster to rock cluster, keeping cover. As they came near the other end of the trench, the dig site came into view. However, that wasn't the only thing that was coming into view. Commander, Caden said. Yeah. We should take cover. My radar is saying we've got a lot of enemy signals coming this way. The blonde preferred to use his eyes. He looked further ahead and saw the Geth coming towards them. He nodded in acknowledgement to Caden, pointing at a cluster close to them. They ducked down behind just in time for the bullets started to fly. Naruto tried leaning out to take a shot but the Geth were too far away. We might be in trouble, he said as he pulled his head back. Don't worry, Commander, Ashley told him as she put her gun away. I got this. She flashed through a few hand seals and stood up. Katon, Gokakyu no Jutsu, Fire Style, Great Fireball Jutsu. A giant fireball spilled forth from her mouth and sailed through the geth, incinerating them. Okay, they're all gone now, she announced after the fireball disappeared. The two men stood up. Wow. That's impressive, Kaiden complimented her as he looked at the destruction in front of them. A lot of geth were burned beyond belief. It honestly looked like someone had tried to melt down a large group of metal statues and managed to get halfway done. It's very well done, Naruto told her. However, his hand blurred as he pulled out a kunai and threw it underhanded at the nearby entrance to the dig site, letting it ricochet off the wall and hit the geth that was hiding on the other side. You missed one, he remarked as the geth fell to the ground, the kunai lodged in the photoreceptor. Show off, Ashley muttered to herself as they entered the dig site. What was that? He asked her without turning to face her, leaning down to pull out the kunai. Nothing, she replied. As she looked around, she frowned. The dig site was the same as the last time, Prothean ruins half buried in the ground. There were less shooting and people running around, but the layout was the same. She could still smell gunfire in the air. There was something missing, though. This is the dig site. The beacon was right here. Well, it's not here anymore, Naruto replied sarcastically. I figured that one out myself, she replied with equal sarcasm. She stopped and considered the situation. It must have been moved. By who? Kaiden asked. Our side? Or the geth? That's hard to say, she admitted. Maybe we'll learn more after we check out the research camp. This spot is practically perfect for an ambush, Naruto noted as he looked around the dig site. The site was hemmed in by a ridge that climbed upwards via a natural ramp and a rock wall. There were only two entrances, the way they came in and the ridge. Do you think anyone survived? He asked her. If the entrances were blocked off, the chances of getting out alive didn't seem high to him. Maybe if they were lucky, she answered, looking around. If I had to guess, they might try hiding in the camp. It's just on the top of this ridge. Up the ramps. She pointed at the ramps in question. Lead the way. She nodded in acknowledgement and took the lead, leading them up the ramp and out of the dig site. The smell of smoke and gunfire followed them. Change of plans, Naruto, Nilus told him through the COMM. There's a small space station up ahead. I want to check it out. I'll wait for you there. Right, he replied. Also, Nilus, the beacon has been moved. We're in the process of finding its location. I'll radio you once we've found out where it is. Got it, the Turian replied before the comm beeped off. As they climbed up the ramp, they saw the trail of smoke coming out of one of the buildings. Looks like they hit the camp hard, Ashley noted as they came into view of the camp. The smoke was attached to a fire. That fire was consuming the building. She hoped there was no one in there when it happened. Kaiden noticed the same thing but kept his eyes alert on the area itself. It's a good place for an ambush. Keep your guard up, he warned the others. Naruto didn't reply, he was too busy looking at the three spikes that had what looked to be blackened corpses skewed on them. Ash, are those the civilians who working at the dig site? He asked her, not taking his eyes off of the spikes. Before she answered, one of the corpses raised its head and moaned. They're still alive. The biotic among them asked in shock. The spikes retracted themselves, lowering the corpses until they were able to touch the ground themselves. They stood up, looked over at the three living humans, and rapidly approached them. Kaiden used his biotics to push them back easily, but it didn't slow them down. It just made the distance between the two groups wider. What have the geth done to them? Ashley demanded as she opened fire on the corpse on the left. It went down within a few moments, like it was an inanimate object and not a former human being. It was unnerving, if she was being honest. I don't know and I don't want to have a first-hand experience. Naruto replied. He flipped through hand seals and inhaled. Futon, Ronkyuden, Wind Style, Drilling Air Bullet. He spat out 2 air bullets at the remaining corpses, taking their heads off and sending them toppling backwards. Kaiden checked the area and found nothing else. "That's all of them, Commander," Kaiden announced. "Spread out, see if you can find anything that indicates survivors are still around," the blonde ordered. They searched the ruined camp, inspecting every part of it. The more they looked, the more it seemed like there weren't any survivors. That is, until Ashley tried a door on one of the 2 still intact buildings. Nothing happened. "Commander, this door is closed," she announced. "The security lock's engaged. Can you open it?" he asked her as he and Kaiden joined her. "No, the code's been changed," she replied with a shake of her head. "Let me take care of it," Kaiden said, stepping up to the lock, his Omni tool appearing. "I've got some training with hacking. Just give me a minute, and, there," he declared triumphantly as the color on the lock changed from red to green. As the door opened, they stepped through, expecting a fight. Instead, they found 2 humans inside. "Humans!" cried the woman with relief. "Thank the sage. Hurry. Close the door," the man beside her urged Naruto. "Before they come back." "There's no need to worry," he assured the 2 of them, making sure they could see his hands. "We're not here to harm or kill you." While someone else might think that those 2 words meant the same thing, in his experience it was the complete opposite. "Thank you. I think we'll be okay now," the woman told him. "Wait, you're Dr. Warren, the one in charge of the excavation," Ashley said in realization. Maybe she would know what had happened when she wasn't there. "Do you know what happened to the beacon?" "It was moved to the spaceport this morning," the doctor answered. "Manuel and I stayed behind to help pack up the camp." She gestured over to the man when she said his name. "When the attack, the men protecting us held them off long enough for us to hide." She grew mournful at the memories. "They gave their lives to save us." "No one is saved," Manuel told her, his voice sounding slightly unhinged. "The age of humanity is ended. Soon, only ruin and corpses will remain." Is he okay?" Naruto asked her, jerking his head at her assistant. "Manuel has a brilliant mind, but he's always been a bit unstable," she explained, trying to be delicate. "Genius and madness are 2 sides of the same coin." "Don't I know it," he thought darkly to himself, remembering the dream he had of Orochimaru. "Is it madness to see the future? To see the destruction rushing towards us? To understand there is no escape? No hope? No, I'm not mad. I'm the only sane one left." Manuel continued to rant. "I gave him an extra dose of his meds after the attack," Dr. Warren told the blonde in way of apology. "That's not going to help him much." He had seen that same kind of look Manuel had on his face on many others before. It was the look of utter hopelessness, people who had survived Obito's attack on their village, whether by his own doing or by someone who followed him, war. The look said it all for them, that it was completely hopeless to try and fight against Obito, that it was like an ant trying to fight someone who could easily crush them with his foot, to which Shikamaru always had a brilliant answer for. "Have you ever seen what a swarm of angry killer ants will do to a person? Will you 2 be safe here?" he asked Dr. Warren. "Yes, of course we will," she answered. "That's good to know, but just in case, I'm going to leave behind a clone." He quickly created said clone, who then stepped outside. "He'll keep an eye outside for you." He turned to face Ashley. "Can you take us to the spaceport?" he asked her. "Yes, I can," she answered without any hesitation. "You can't stop it. Nobody can stop it. Night is falling." "The darkness of eternity," Manuel ranted. "Hush, Manuel," Dr. Warren ordered him. "Go lie down. You'll feel better when the medication kicks in." She faced the others. "I'm sorry about all that." "It's okay," Naruto assured her. "We'll leave now. Remember, there's a clone outside who'll protect you until more help comes. Stay inside, and keep the door closed." He walked out of the building and the other 2 members of his team followed. As the door closed behind them, he exchanged a nod with Clone and proceeded to move to the trail that led away from both the dig site and the camp. As they moved, he pressed his finger against the COMM. Nillis, we found Dr. Warren of the excavation team. According to her, the beacon was moved to the spaceport this morning. We're on our way there. Acknowledged, your clone and I will hold down and meet you there. We'll go on together to retrieve the beacon from there, Nillis replied before ending the call. Both he and the clone were approaching the entrance to the spaceport from the forest, just a little way ahead of Naruto and his team. As they got closer, the Spectre saw that someone was standing in the open at the entry of the spaceport. He motioned the clone to duck behind cover. They crouched behind a low wall and waited. When Nillis was ready, he moved out of cover and lifted his gun, ready to fire. But when he saw who it was, he lowered the gun. Saran, he said in surprise. The clone stood up from behind the wall and joined Nillis. The person in question turned around to face them. He was a Turian, but he didn't have the tattoos on his face like Nillis did and had also had a horn-like feature on each side of his face that were elongated as they extended backwards as well as on the top of his head. Probably the most obvious thing about him was the fact that his left arm wasn't even his, it was an artificial one. Nillis, he greeted the Spectre, his voice cool and calm. Who is this? He pointed at the clone. Jonin Naruto Uzumaki, Spectre candidate, the clone introduced himself, pretending to actually be Naruto. Nillis is observing me? I see. That does seem appropriate, seeing as how Nillis believes your species has potential, HH commented, making it sound like it wasn't a good thing. Thanks, I think. He looked over at Nillis. Who exactly is this guy? This is Seren Arterius, another Spectre and my former mentor, or sensei in your elemental language, he explained. So we can trust him. Yes, but... He turned to face his former mentor. This isn't your mission, Seren. What are you doing here? He asked as he took his supporting hand off his gun. The council thought you could use some help on this one. Plus, now I want to see how the candidate behaves while on a mission. Seren answered as he walked past him, placing a brief reassuring hand on his shoulder. The clone heard a noise over to the side. What was that? He asked, looking over to where the noise came from. It seemed like it was coming from behind some crates. Go check it out, Nillis ordered. He nodded and began moving towards the location of the noise. I wasn't expecting the Geth here, the Turian Spectre remarked as he looked around. It seemed like Eden Prime was burning. He wasn't kidding himself. It was burning. The situation's bad. Don't worry, Seren said calmly as he turned around and raised his pistol. I've got it under control. That's it for this